I knew I'd remember the exact tilt of her head before I remembered her name. The late afternoon light caught in her hair, and the water behind her flickered silver, as if the pool had been waiting just to reflect her. She wasn't doing anything remarkable, just leaning back in the deck chair, one hand curled around the stem of a glass, the other resting on the edge of her knee. But when her eyes lifted and met mine, it felt like the air shifted, as though someone had dropped a secret into the silence. "You remind me of trouble," she said softly, like a thought escaping before she could cage it. I should have laughed. I should have said something, anything, that would keep the moment light. But I just stood there, towel in hand, water dripping from my shoulders, trying not to stare. She didn't look away. Her name was Elena. A friend of my friend's mother, visiting for the weekend. Mid-40s, maybe, though that word didn't fit her. She had a kind of composure I couldn't pin down, graceful, yes, but there was something underneath, like a song playing under a closed door. I finally walked closer, my footsteps sticking against the hot stone. She shifted slightly, making space on the chair beside her, though she didn't say a word. That small movement pulled me toward her more than any invitation could have. I sat close enough that the scent of sunscreen and faint citrus perfume reached me, clinging to the warm air between us. She set her glass down, her fingers brushing the rim longer than necessary, as if delaying the silence. "You're what, 20?" she asked, though she already knew. 26. I said quickly, maybe too quickly. Her mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Old enough to argue." I didn't answer. My throat had tightened, and I could feel the heat rising in my skin, not from the sun. Her arm rested along the chair's edge, so near that when I shifted slightly, my wet hand brushed against hers. Just for a second. She didn't move. Her fingers stayed where they were, cool against my damp skin, but she tilted her head, studying me with an intensity that made me want to look away, though I couldn't. There was a rhythm between us, silences that carried more than the words did. She spoke in fragments, and I filled the spaces with everything I didn't know how to say. "You shouldn't sit here dripping water all over me," she murmured, her eyes still fixed on mine. "Should I move?" Another pause. Her lips parted, like she was weighing something. Then she leaned back and exhaled. "No. Stay." The sound of kids shouting at the far end of the pool felt distant, muffled, as though we were on a small island in the middle of the world. The cicadas sang somewhere in the trees, insistent, while her presence pressed closer, heavier than the summer heat. I noticed the faint lines at the corners of her eyes when she glanced away, the kind that didn't age her but deepened her, like a story told more than once. Her hand shifted, just slightly, until her fingertip rested against the back of mine. It wasn't an accident. I tried to swallow the rush of words that wanted to break out, compliments, confessions, questions, but my voice caught. She must have noticed, because her eyes softened, though she didn't let me escape the weight of her gaze. Then the sliding door behind us opened with a sudden thud, and someone's voice called out, a casual interruption, sharp against the fragile stillness we had built. Elena's hand lifted from mine instantly, like it had never been there. But her eyes lingered for one more second, too long, promising that something had just begun. That evening, the house was loud with chatter. The smell of grilled meat drifted through the back door, and the sound of clinking glasses rose and fell in uneven bursts. I kept to the corner of the patio, leaning against the railing with a beer bottle I hadn't touched. My eyes kept finding her across the room, even when I tried to fix them elsewhere. Elena laughed easily with my friend's mother, but her gaze flickered toward me once, too quick, but sharp enough to feel. I looked away immediately, only to catch myself stealing another glance a minute later. I told myself it was nothing. A heat of the day slip, an accident of proximity. But the way my hand remembered the exact weight of hers resting against it told a different story. She didn't approach me until later, when most of the crowd had moved inside and the patio lights hummed above us. She came to stand at the railing beside me, her bare arm brushing mine as though there was nowhere else to stand, even though the space around us was wide open. "You're quiet," she said, voice low, almost private despite the noise behind us. "I'm watching." I said, then realized how that sounded. I cleared my throat. Just listening. Her lips curved, and I couldn't tell if she was amused or touched. You don't sound like most men your age. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but she turned her eyes toward the dark garden instead, as though she'd left the thought half unfinished on purpose. The silence between us stretched again. It wasn't awkward. It was dangerous. She lifted her glass, took a sip, and I caught the faint scent of wine on her breath when she leaned slightly closer to set it down on the railing. Too close. I shifted my weight, but my arm brushed hers again, skin against skin this time. Elena, I said, her name awkward on my tongue, like I'd borrowed it from someone else. She glanced at me. A pause. You don't have to say my name like it's a mistake. Her words hit harder than I expected, and for a moment, I forgot how to answer. The lights behind us flickered, someone laughing too loud indoors, and the moment nearly collapsed under the weight of ordinary noise. But then she asked, so casually it nearly escaped notice. Do you have someone? I hesitated. No. Not right now. She nodded, but her shoulders tensed, as if the answer hadn't surprised her. Then softer. I was married once. Long ago. Didn't last. He was. She cut herself off, shaking her head lightly. Well, that's history. The words lingered between us, unfinished but heavy. I wanted to ask her more, but her profile in the dim light warned me she'd already given more than she intended. I don't usually, she began, then trailed off, biting her lip. Usually what? I asked before I could stop myself. She met my eyes, and in hers was something unguarded, raw enough to make me want to look away. This, she said simply, gesturing faintly at the small space between us, our shoulders touching, the air charged. Then she exhaled, and the spell loosened. Inside, someone called her name, breaking the fragile quiet. She started to step away, but then her hand lifted, hesitant, almost against her will, and brushed against my shoulder. A soft, fleeting touch, nothing more than fingertips grazing fabric. But it was enough. I froze, afraid that if I moved, the moment would vanish. Her hand lingered a second longer than necessary, then dropped back to her side. Her voice softened, meant only for me. Be careful, Mark. People might notice. She left before I could answer, weaving back into the light and noise of the house. But the place where her hand had touched burned like a secret, one I knew I wouldn't put down any time soon. The house had gone quiet by midnight. A few empty glasses sat forgotten on the counter, and the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen. I came in barefoot, half expecting to be alone, but she was already there. Elena stood at the sink, rinsing a glass, the loose strap of her sundress slipping down her shoulder. The dim light above the stove caught the curve of her neck, the soft bend of her arm. She didn't turn, but she knew I was there. Couldn't sleep either? I shook my head, even though she couldn't see. Too warm. She glanced over her shoulder then, eyes catching mine with a look that lingered a beat too long. Or too restless. I swallowed, stepping closer. The tile felt cool under my feet, but the air between us warmed with every inch. Want some water? She asked, already reaching for another glass. I should have said yes, but all I managed was, no, thanks. My voice was rougher than I intended. Her hand hesitated on the cupboard handle, then lowered slowly, as though she'd been stalling for something else. She turned fully, leaning back against the counter, her body angled toward me. You're staring, she murmured. I wasn't, I began, but the denial collapsed before it left my mouth. She tilted her head, almost smiling, but her eyes gave nothing away. The silence stretched, filled only by the faint drip of water from the sink. I took another step. Now I was close enough to see the faint freckles on her collarbone, the rise and fall of her breath. Close enough that the scent of wine lingered on her lips. Elena. Her name came out like a question, though I didn't know what I was asking for. Her fingers lifted slightly, as if to reach for me, but stopped midair. The hesitation said everything, the weight of years, the age gap, the invisible eyes of people who weren't even there. "Mark, we can't," she whispered, the words unfinished, her breath brushing my face. Before I could answer, a sound cracked the tension, footsteps on the stairs. A door creaked open. My friend's voice drifted faintly down the hall, groggy, muttering about the bathroom. We froze. Her hand dropped back to the counter, her body stiffening. The seconds dragged, my heartbeat pounding too loud in my ears. The footsteps passed. The door shut. Silence returned, heavier than before. She exhaled slowly, almost trembling, though her voice stayed steady. "See? That's what I mean. One wrong move and—" She cut herself off, shaking her head. But she didn't move away. If anything, she shifted closer, her shoulder grazing mine. A deliberate accident. I looked down at her, every nerve pulling me forward. My lips parted, ready to close the space between us. But her eyes caught mine, sharp with warning and longing all at once. Her hand rose again. This time it landed lightly on my chest, palm flat, a fragile barrier. Her touch burned even through the thin cotton of my shirt. "You should go back to bed," she whispered. I should have. I didn't move. Her hand lingered there, unmoving, until the silence became unbearable. Then she let it slide just slightly, her fingers trailing down, a small betrayal of her own command. Either of us spoke. Either of us kissed. But when I finally stepped back, the air between us felt broken open, impossible to close again. The next night, the storm rolled in without warning. Heavy clouds smothered the stars, and rain slapped against the windows in sudden, wild bursts. The rest of the house had gone quiet early, everyone retreating to their rooms. I found her in the living room, lights low, curled on the sofa with a blanket around her shoulders. A book lay open but forgotten in her lap. The flicker of the storm lit her face in pale flashes, her hair falling loose, softer than I'd ever seen it. She looked up when I entered, and for a moment, the sound of the rain filled the silence between us. "You couldn't sleep again?" she asked. "Not with that thunder," I said, lowering myself onto the sofa's edge. She shifted slightly, making space though there was plenty of room. I sat too close anyway. The scent of her, warm fabric, a trace of perfume, wrapped around me. "You're restless," she murmured, studying me. I almost laughed. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." Her voice was steady, but her hand tightened around the blanket. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and let the words out before I could stop them. "It's not the storm. It's you." The confession dropped into the room like lightning. She inhaled sharply, the kind of breath someone takes when they've been holding it too long. "Elena," I started, then faltered. "I can't stop noticing you. The way you look at me. The way you—" I stopped, jaw tight. "I don't know what to do with it." Her eyes searched mine, as though looking for proof I didn't mean it. But I did. The storm cracked outside, rattling the glass, and in the silence after, she spoke. "You think I don't feel it?" she said softly, almost bitterly. "Do you know how dangerous this is? How many people would—" She cut herself off, shaking her head. I reached out without thinking, brushing a loose strand of hair back from her cheek. My hand trembled slightly, but I didn't pull away. Her eyes closed for a fraction of a second, as though the touch undid her. When they opened again, she whispered, "Mark, you're too young. You don't understand what this could cost me." "I don't care," I said. My voice was low, fierce, closer than I realized. "I just know I—" The words broke before I could finish. Her hand lifted, hesitated, then pressed lightly against my chest. Not pushing me away, not pulling me closer, just resting there, a fragile point of contact. The storm rolled again, the sound filling every corner of the house. I could feel the warmth of her palm through my shirt, the way her fingers curled slightly as if betraying her own resistance. "You'll ruin me," she whispered, and I couldn't tell if it was a warning or a plea. I leaned closer, close enough to feel her breath mix with mine. She didn't move back. The blanket slipped from her shoulder, and my hand caught it, fingers brushing the curve of her arm. Her skin was warm, alive, and I wanted more than I dared admit. Elena! Her name came out like a vowel. Her lips parted, her eyes fixed on mine. Every nerve screamed to close the distance. I could feel it, the inevitable, the reckless edge of something we couldn't undo. And then, a sharp knock at the door. We both froze. Her hand jerked back, my breath caught in my throat. The knock came again, louder this time. She whispered, almost trembling, "Don't move." The knock on the door echoed through the dim living room, sharper than the thunder. Elena pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, her eyes wide and alert in the flickering stormlight. "Stay here," she whispered. She crossed the room quickly, barefoot, her hair falling forward as she opened the door just a crack. I couldn't see who it was, but I heard the voice, a woman's too chipper for the hour. My friend's mother. "Elena? Sorry, did I wake you? I thought I saw the light." I froze. "No, I was just reading," Elena answered smoothly, though I caught the faint tremor in her voice. "Couldn't sleep." There was a pause, then my friend's mother lowered her voice, conspiratorial. "I wanted to ask you something. About Mark. Well, you've noticed, right? The way he looks at you." My stomach tightened. Heat rose to my face. Elena didn't answer immediately. I saw her hand grip the doorframe, knuckles widening. "He's young," she said finally, her tone careful, measured. "I know," the other woman said, chuckling. "That's why it's cute. He doesn't hide it very well. Just don't break his heart, HM?" Elena gave a soft laugh, light, practiced, but not real. Then the door closed, and silence rushed back into the room. She stood there a moment, her back against the door, head bowed. Her shoulders rose and fell with a breath too sharp to be calm. "Elena!" My voice came out rough, low. She turned toward me slowly. Her face was composed, but her eyes betrayed something else, fear, maybe, or the weight of being seen. "You heard," she said flatly. I stood, my body tense. "She knows." "No," Elena corrected quickly, shaking her head. "She suspects." "That's different. But if you give her reason." She stopped herself, pressing her fingers to her temple. I crossed the room, closing the distance between us. She didn't move, though her whole body seemed to stiffen, like she was bracing herself. "Elena," I said again, softer this time. "I can't keep pretending. Not after." I broke off, the memory of her hand on my chest, the near kiss that still buzzed in my veins. Her eyes flicked up to mine, and I saw it, the same ache, the same pull she was trying so hard to bury. "This is reckless," she whispered, but her voice cracked. "Then be reckless with me." The words slipped out before I could take them back. She inhaled sharply, her body leaning almost imperceptibly toward me. The storm cracked again outside, light spilling across her face, catching the faint tremble of her lips. "You don't understand what it costs to be seen this way," she said, her voice barely audible. "I've spent years keeping things neat, respectable. And then you." She stopped, biting her lip hard, as if the truth had slipped too far already. I stepped closer, so close my arm brushed hers, the static of the storm alive between us. "And then me what?" I asked, my voice low, urgent. Her eyes locked on mine. "You make me want to throw it all away." The words hit like a confession and a curse at once. She dropped her gaze immediately, as if she regretted it the moment it left her mouth. Her hands fumbled with the edge of the blanket, gripping it so tightly I could see her knuckles pale. I reached out, gently touching her wrist. She didn't pull back. If anything, she trembled beneath my fingers. "Elena!" Her breath caught, shallow and uneven. Then she slipped past me, brushing against my chest as she moved toward the sofa again. The touch was accidental only in form. It lingered in the air, scorching in its briefness. She sank down onto the edge of the sofa, burying her face briefly in her hands. "If this goes on, there's no turning back," she whispered. I sat beside her, not touching, but close enough that our knees brushed. The storm raged, the world narrowing to that single point of contact. We're already past that, I said quietly. She didn't argue. She didn't move away. She just stayed there, breathing hard, her body angled toward mine, the invisible thread between us pulled tighter than ever. And in that silence, something shifted, not possibility, but inevitability. The storm had quieted, but the silence it left behind was heavier. Rain tapped against the glass in slow, irregular drops, as if even the sky was holding its breath. Elena sat at the edge of the sofa, the blanket fallen to the floor, her shoulders bare in the dim light. I sat beside her, close enough that our knees brushed, either of us pulling away. The space between us was thin, charged, almost painful in its restraint. Her hand fidgeted against her lap, twisting the corner of the fabric. Mine hovered close, wanting to close over hers, afraid to break whatever fragile balance we were holding. "You should go upstairs," she said finally, her voice low, raw. "We should end this before it begins." I leaned closer, my voice dropping. "It already began. The second you said I reminded you of trouble." She gave a sharp exhale, part laugh, part despair. Her hand lifted as if to push me away, but instead, it brushed against my jaw, feather-light, trembling. She froze at her own touch, eyes wide as though she'd caught herself in the act. "Elena," I whispered. Her lips parted, but no words came. I reached up, covering her hand with mine, pressing it against my skin. Her breath itched, shaky, her chest rising unevenly. "This is wrong," she murmured. "Then let it be wrong." Her eyes closed, just for a second, as though surrendering to the sound of my voice. When they opened again, there was no disguise left, just longing, unguarded and fierce. I leaned in, my forehead almost touching hers, our breaths colliding in the scant inches between. The air was thick, every heartbeat a drum. I could feel her trembling, could hear the tiny catch in her throat when I whispered, "Tell me to stop." Her hand slid down from my face to my shoulder, clutching the fabric of my shirt. "I can't," she breathed. That was enough. I moved closer, slow, uncertain, until our lips hovered just short of meeting. The pause was unbearable, every nerve stretched taut, every ounce of restraint breaking down. She tilted forward, just slightly, as though pulled by gravity itself. Then she kissed me. It wasn't careful or practiced. It was messy, desperate, the kind of kiss born from weeks of silence and restraint. Her hand tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, while my fingers traced the curve of her arm, memorizing the warmth of her skin. When we finally broke apart, her forehead rested against mine, both of us breathing hard, the storm outside forgotten. "This changes everything," she whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded, unable to stop the small, unsteady smile breaking across my face. "Good." She laughed then, quiet, shaky, almost disbelieving. "You're impossible." "And you?" I asked. Her eyes softened, her hand still pressed against my shoulder. "I'm ruined." But the way she said it wasn't regret. It was release. We stayed there, pressed together in the silence, knowing the choice had been made. Whatever came next, questions, judgment, fallout, we had crossed the line. And neither of us would pretend anymore. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the world washed clean, the pool a mirror of pale sunlight. I stepped outside, the air cool and damp, carrying the faint sweetness of wet grass. She was already there, sitting at the edge of the deck with her feet dangling above the water, a mug of coffee balanced between her palms. For a moment, I just stood in the doorway, watching her. She looked calmer than she had in days, though her shoulders carried the weight of everything we hadn't said yet. She glanced back, sensing me. Her eyes softened. "You didn't sleep much either, did you?" I shook my head and crossed the deck, lowering myself beside her. The wood was still damp, cool under my legs. She handed me the mug without a word, and I took a sip before passing it back, the warmth lingering on my lips like an unspoken memory of the night before. Neither of us rushed to speak. The silence wasn't tense anymore. It was thick with understanding, like the space after a confession has already been made. Finally, she said, "I've been trying to make sense of this. You and me." She let out a small laugh, shaking her head. It's absurd, isn't it? I'm supposed to be wiser, steadier. And here I am. Here you are, I interrupted gently. With me. Her lips parted, but she didn't argue. Her eyes flickered down to our hands resting between us, close but not touching. After a long moment, she slid hers into mine. Her grip was tentative at first, then firmer, like she was daring herself to stop hiding. I turned her hand over, thumb brushing the delicate lines of her palm. She exhaled shakily, leaning the slightest bit into me. I was afraid, she admitted, her voice low. Afraid of what people would say. Afraid of letting myself want this. I tilted my head toward her, so close that my words barely needed sound. And now? Her gaze lifted, steady, vulnerable. Now I think I'd regret it more if I let you slip away. The air shifted, warmer somehow, though the morning breeze still lingered. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her gently against me. She didn't resist. Her head came to rest against my chest, her hair soft against my jaw. We stayed like that, quiet, the world moving slowly around us. The cicadas were back in the trees, their hum steady, grounding. Her fingers toyed with mine, tracing idle patterns, a small habit that felt more intimate than any kiss. After a while, I kissed the top of her head, letting the words come out as simply as I could. We'll figure it out. One day at a time. She gave a soft laugh against me. You sound older than you are. Or maybe you make me older, I teased. Her smile pressed into my chest, and I felt her relax fully for the first time. The doubts hadn't vanished. They lingered, like shadows, but they no longer stood between us. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes met mine with quiet certainty. No more hiding, no more excuses. Just the truth of what we were, here, in this imperfect morning light. She leaned in, pressing a slow kiss to my lips, softer than the night before but deeper somehow. A promise, not just a release. When she pulled back, her hand stayed cradling my cheek. Trouble, she whispered, with a tenderness that undid me completely. And for the first time, I didn't resist the word. We sat there together, hand in hand, the pool reflecting the sky above us, the days stretching ahead, uncertain, yes, but ours.